Hi guys, in this video we are looking at Warwick Driving Test Centre doing a mock test. We're turning left out of the test centre here and straight away we are in a 40 mph zone. Now the way you know that is looking at the post by the bus stop there. You'll see a reminder for that speed limit. It's quite small, telling you it's a reminder rather than a change as well. Whenever the speed limit changes, you normally get larger signs and one on each side of the road. So those small signs are a reminder that you're already in that 40 mph zone. Now coming around the bend, you can see the pupils doing 27 mph. I'm not too fussed by that. I'm not going to mark it as a problem because we're coming around the bend. There's nothing behind us. It's not causing any disruption. However, there'd be no harm in going a little bit quicker into that bend if it's safe to do so. Just up ahead, we've got a few bends coming up where the speed will need to be reduced to come around safely. If you're coming around here at 40 mph, you really can feel that it's not appropriate. So notice here the pupil speed dropping below 30 as we come around these bends. Just as we come around this second bend, you'll see the signposts for the traffic light junction where we'll be turning left. Now when you see those signposts, that is a good point to start your mirror checks and your signals. This is telling you where to go, so you're responding to that by checking your mirrors and signaling. Notice the pupil taking up the left lane nice and early too, and the 30 sign he just passed before the traffic lights. So really important to keep those eyes moving as you're coming up to junctions so you avoid missing any road signs like this. As we make the turn at the traffic lights, what I want to see as well is a quick glance around, just making sure that there's no blue light vehicles, pedestrians, or anything else that could cause you an issue as you pull out into that junction. Remember, a green light doesn't mean you can go without care. It means you can go if it's safe, so you're responsible to check that it's safe. On the left, you'll see a height restriction for the bridge up ahead. Now, whilst that doesn't affect us directly, it can be useful information to know if there's a large vehicle in front of you, because that vehicle may have to stop and turn around or reverse to get out of that situation. And that's going to help with your planning, of course. Up ahead, you can see everyone's slowing down for the junction ahead of us. It is a traffic light junction. The pupil does a really nice job of just coming off the power and letting the car slow down initially before having to brake. That means that transition from accelerator to brake is nice and smooth, and you should always pair that with mirror checks too. Make them apparent with some head movements too. That's going to help the examiner see that you're doing your checks. It's also going to help open up your own peripheral view and give you a better sense of awareness of what's around you. As we carry on down this road, you'll want to be moving your head, scanning around side to side, make a mental note of things like the bikes waiting to pull out on the left or the speed change up ahead that's just before the roundabout. At the roundabout, we will be turning right second exit. So it's important firstly to know that speed limit before you enter the junction so you know how fast it's going to be afterwards. Mirrors and signal as you approach, and of course take up a good position. The pupil's done a really nice job of this. Now if you notice, the cars from our right are indicating left. There was no need for the pupil to slow down because those cars are obviously not taking priority off of us. So I'm going to give him a driver fault for hesitation there. It's also important to put your left signal on when you're leaving a roundabout so everyone knows what you're doing. So that was missed on this occasion, and I'm going to record a driver fault for that as well. Just noticing these pedestrians here, this is an example of why it is important to look around when you're moving off at a green light too. Remember that green light does not give you a clear pass to run people over. It just means that you can go if it's safe. So you've got to firstly make sure it's safe to go. That car nearly got caught out by those pedestrians being a little bit silly crossing there. But as a driver, we have that accountability. The pedestrians don't, because there's no formal training on how to cross a road these days. Up ahead, we're taking the next road on the right. Now when we're turning right, of course, we want to be checking our mirrors and signaling. Also be mindful to look for any oncoming cars that you might have to give way to, and look up into that road before you make your turn. And that's going to help you spot speed limit changes like the 30 sign up on the left as we made that turn, and to know you've got a safe path before you enter that new road. Now, there's a lot of parked cars down this road, and it forces you out onto the wrong side of the road quite a bit. So you've got to be very aware of your mirrors and who's behind you and your clearance on the left, but also looking as far ahead as you can so you can predict problems like this one here, where we can't see what's coming until you're already going out around those cars. Now, the pupil was borderline on his speed there, but I don't think there was enough risk to record any faults there. If there was a car already coming through, that would be a different story, however. He also handles this situation really nicely, bringing the speed down really slowly as he negotiates his way through and checking those mirrors frequently too. That mirror use is so important when you're moving the car around, because without that mirror use, you don't know what's around you, so you can't move around safely. If you're moving around through a gap like that and there's a cyclist nearby, you want to know where they are. So those mirrors are a really useful tool to use. They're attached to the car for a reason, so make really good use of them. Up ahead, we're going to turn right into the racecourse car park. Now that's going to allow us to do a maneuver. On this mock test, I'm going to ask this pupil to do a reverse bay park. Now I tend to teach the 45-degree method, where you pull up directly in front of your parking space. You'll then pull fully away from that parking space, and then you'll pull fully towards it as you reverse in. That is, I find, the most effective way of doing the maneuver. If you've got a way that works for you that's different, then by all means do that, as long as you're taking your time, you're looking around plenty, checking over your shoulders frequently, and you end up in the parking space when you finish. If you don't finish in the parking space, check around you, pull out again, and then correct it. If you correct it, it's not going to cost you your driving test. It will just pick you up a driver fault. What will cost you on your driving test, however, is not making effective observations when you do make that correction. So make sure you're looking around plenty. This pupil decided to do a 90-degree method, where he's reversing from a 90-degree angle, and it didn't quite work out for him. So he does a really good example here of pulling out of that space to correct that position, because he's not actually in the parking space. Now, if you left the car with the wheels over the line, that is going to pick you up a serious fault for control. If you correct it, it will only pick you up a driver fault for control. So that's what I'm recording there, is a driver fault for his control, because he's having to correct his maneuver. Unfortunately for this pupil, as he does the correction, he doesn't look around effectively. He reverses without looking behind him once, and unfortunately that's got to go down as a serious fault. When you're reversing, make sure you look out the back of the car, over your left shoulder, over your right shoulder. Don't just rely on the mirrors or the camera, if you've got one, to guide you in. You've got to look around, or you will get a serious fault. Just a note on car parks: whenever you go in or out of a car park, make sure you're keeping your speed low, that you're following the markings as you would a normal road, and that you're looking around for not just the normal kind of hazards you see on a road, but also people walking to and from the cars, people getting in and out of the cars, or even cars pulling in and out of parking spaces. Sometimes people will drive over those spaces too, so really good to make all-round observations as you go around those car parks. But the low speed is what is going to keep you safe there. If you're flooring it around a car park, you're going to put yourself at risk. I got the pupil to do his show me question there, which was to wash the front windscreen using the washers and wipers. You can find these linked on a playlist on my channel as well, so do feel free to have a look at those. As we come up to the exit for the car park, we are turning right, and you'll notice that big red sign and those big white letters on the ground telling you that you must stop. Now, whilst the pupil does successfully stop the car, he doesn't signal until he's stopped, which means I'm going to record a driver fault for his timing on those signals. You want to signal as you come up to the junction and give people plenty of time to know what you're doing. It's no good signaling when you get there, because your position already tells people what you're doing. So mirrors, signal, then position the car, rather than mirrors, position, and then signal. Up ahead, we're going to be taking a left turn into Shakespeare Avenue. As we come up here, there's a really open view to the left-hand side. You can turn your head nice and early and see what's going on in there, and you can see all the parked cars as you're coming in too. With the parked cars and the bend and the pedestrian in the road, that warrants a nice low speed as you're coming round, particularly where your view is restricted and cars coming the other way might be hidden from you like that Peugeot. That was a nice response from the pupil, however, just tucking in and letting them pass before carrying on. What I want to see as well is lots of mirror use if you do need to do that. Up at the roundabout, we're going straight ahead, second exit. So mirrors on approach, check for cars from the right and make sure that you're focused on your exit. Now I'm going to record a fault for undue hesitation here because the pupil holds back even though there was plenty of time to go before this Audi came round the roundabout. Because there was no one behind, it's only going to go as a driver fault. I'm going to record a serious fault here, however, for his signalling because he actually went round to the right without a right signal. Now, that could cause a problem for the vehicle coming the other way. Because it's quite close proximity, I deem that as quite a high risk, and that's why it's going as a serious fault. Now, if you do make a wrong turn on your driving test, the wrong turn itself is not the end of the world. So all I'm going to do is reroute the pupil back towards that roundabout so we can go back on route. And you'll see he does this again later on as well, where he takes a wrong turn. The wrong turn itself is not the problem. What we want to do is make sure that that turn is done safely. I'm going to take the opportunity here, however, to get the pupil to pull over and then drive on again. The examiners will ask you to do this several times during your test, and it's just to see that firstly you can pick a safe place to pull over. Secondly, they want to see that you can handle other traffic effectively. So if there's someone following you, that you're checking your mirrors, you're signaling and giving them plenty of time to respond. And thirdly, that when you move off, you're checking it's safe, checking over your right shoulder before you pull away so you're covering that blind spot, and then moving on nice and safely. Pupil does a really nice job of that, so no faults picked up while he's doing that. As we come towards the end of the road, we're going to turn right, and that brings us back up to the roundabout where the pupil went the wrong way. Because it's one way, we can position more to the right because there's no incoming traffic to give way to. Just be mindful of things like that van blocking your view. Make sure you can see safe before you pull out. The most common reason for people failing the driving test has consistently been, for a number of years now, not making effective observations at junctions. So things like that van blocking the view, the examiners want to see you hold back and creep around it and look around it effectively. They don't want to see you just pull out around it without checking it's safe first. As we come down this road, there's a lot of parked cars, so we want to be mindful of what's coming the other way. And that, of course, means carrying a lowered speed as you make your way through and covering your mirrors frequently. We're then going to turn right at the end of this road. Now, this is where the pupil's observations weren't exactly spot on, and he's actually put himself slightly over that giveaway line, causing these cars from the right to have to move out slightly to avoid him. Because it's only slight, I'm only recording a driver fault. If he'd have stuck his nose out any further, then that could potentially have been a serious or dangerous fault. So really important when you come up to the end of a road that you stop before the giveaway line. Even going slightly over it can cause issues for the traffic, and that's what's going to pick you up the fault. When you join a new road, it is important to build your speed up effectively. So I'm recording a fault here for progress because the pupil's hovering at 20 mile an hour rather than picking himself up to the 30 mile an hour limit that it is. We got a lovely clear road ahead. There's no reason to be doing 20 mile an hour at that point. We could have picked it up a lot quicker. That's why it's a problem. If it would have caused any problems to other traffic, that driver fault would quickly become a serious fault as well. As we enter the 40 zone here, it is important again just to make sure you don't go up to that 40 before you get to the sign. The sign is where the limit applies. So if you're going from a 30 to a 40 zone, it is 30 mile an hour until you pass the sign, and then you can accelerate. So make sure you're being very strict with yourself about that one, and that way you're going to avoid picking up faults on your driving test. Just up ahead, we have a roundabout where the pupil is supposed to be going straight ahead, second exit, and that signpost is Stratford. Now, we should use the left lane for that, and it's the road directly ahead of us. The pupil's got himself in a little bit of a fluster here, though, put himself in the right lane and then continued around the roundabout to go back on himself, fourth exit. That in itself isn't a problem, but when he leaves the roundabout, there's no mirror checks on the left, and there could be a car there because there's plenty of space for one to be there. We also know there was a car entering the roundabout from the other side, so this becomes a real high risk in my opinion. You cannot change lane without checking it safe first. Leaving the roundabout, he's also very hesitant to pick up his speed. It is a 40 mph zone, and you can see him hovering at 28 mph here. Now, this could escalate into a serious fault if somebody catches up with him, but by the time someone does catch up, he's picking up his speed in response to that. So it's only going to be a driver fault on this occasion. Just be very mindful that you must pick up your speed where the road is clear for you to do so. As we come into the 30 zone, he's very slightly over the speed limit, passing that sign at 32 mph. It's not enough, in my opinion, to warrant any faults, so I'm not going to record anything for that, but just be mindful that when you come into a lower speed limit, that limit applies at the sign, not after it. So you want to be bringing that speed down before you reach the sign. Just up ahead, I'm going to get my pupil to use a road on the left to turn around. We're going to turn left through a little side street here. It's very hard to see, very tight, so you can see the pupil coming in really slowly, which is quite a nice approach to that, quite a nice entry. And round to the other end of this road where we'll turn right to go back up to that roundabout where we went the wrong way. Now, as I said before, making a wrong turn is not a problem in itself. It's how you make the turn that matters. If you do take a wrong turn and you have to get rerouted, you are still going to be assessed on the rerouting. So my pupil is still being assessed at this point. There wasn't anything I felt worth marking down this road. He was very cautious down there, using his mirrors fairly frequently. And as we come up to the end of the road, bit of an awkward angle there. He does get it tucked in as best he can. And it's quite a blind junction too, so he's got to stick his nose out a little bit to see. Now, previously, I did mark him for sticking his nose over that giveaway line, but on this occasion, because of the lack of visibility, it's essential to stick your nose out to see. So that's perfectly justifiable. That's why I'm not going to record a fault on that occasion. As we come back into the 40 zone, the pupil's a little more fluent in picking up his speed, and this is going to lead us back up to that roundabout where he mistakenly made a U-turn. I'm going to remind him that we're going straight ahead at that roundabout second exit, just to make sure he can get the right direction. What we're looking for when we go straight ahead at a roundabout is typically you're going to be in the left-hand lane. You're not going to signal until you pass the first exit, and as you go across the roundabout, you're going to stick to that left-hand position all the way around, going nice and wide on the way into the roundabout. Now, on top of that, because you'd be using the left-hand lane, I'd want to see lots of right-hand mirror use to ensure that that other lane is not going to cause you a problem. Now, unfortunately, the pupil makes another mistake coming across this roundabout, and he doesn't stick his lane, he just straight lines the roundabout. So this is got to go down as a serious fault, particularly because the mirror use wasn't sufficient enough to make that reasonable or safe. You notice coming around the bend here, the pupil's sitting just under 30 mph. It was quite difficult with the sun glaring in his face. He said that it was very difficult to see there. So that is the right response if the weather is affecting you too. If you can't see properly, you slow down and make sure you're safe, because that's better than going in blind. Up ahead, we've got Longbridge Island, and we're going straight ahead, third exit towards Stratford. Now, the pupil goes into lane 2 on the approach here. Lane 2 does work. Lane 1 also goes to Stratford. So whatever lane you choose, it's essential to maintain that lane on the way around and keep an eye on the lanes next to you using those mirrors too. This one's also a giveaway from this direction, so you can see we've got right up to that giveaway line, and the pupil's waiting quite nicely, quite patiently for a gap because we've got quite a lot of distance to cover as we enter that roundabout. Up ahead, you can see the direction board telling you what lane to use for Stratford, and you'll see it is lane 1 and 2. So the pupil is nicely positioned and is set to go the correct direction at this point. Coming around this roundabout, you can use the markings and the signs to help you keep your positioning and make sure you're going the right way. Just be mindful of the traffic lights as you come around as well. As you can see here, sometimes you'll get traffic queuing across those junctions. If the lights change when you're in this situation, then you are responsible to make the decision whether you go or not. If you go and you don't clear the junction, that could cause you a problem. So if there's not a clear path, sometimes better to hold back. Notice here again the big sign there telling us lane 1 and 2 for Stratford, the markings that match that, and that leads us into the next exit. Unfortunately, this pupil crosses the lane without checking his mirrors, so that has to go down as a serious fault again. If you are changing position without looking in your mirrors, then you do not know what problem you're causing, and that is why it's got to go down as a serious fault on your test. Now the pupil does need to move back over to the right hand lane to go straight ahead at the next roundabout. So he's done a really nice job of that, checking his mirrors, signalling and getting in, keeping a not too bad following distance behind the car in front, and then entering the roundabout safely. At this point you should aim for that left lane as best you can. If you're in this position and you need to cross lanes, once again you need to be on those mirrors, you need to be signalling. Now, unfortunately, this is the third time the pupil has crossed positions without looking in his mirrors, so that has to go down as another serious fault. Now, just a heads up here that if your driving does cause repeated serious faults like this on your driving test, the examiners do have a point where they will pull you over and abandon the test. They will walk back to the test centre and leave you there, and your instructor will have to come out and meet you. So you need to make sure that your driving demonstrates a good level of awareness and low risks wherever you can. If you're making repeated high-risk errors like this, changing lanes without looking to see if it's safe first, then examiners can terminate that driving test. When you're traveling down country lanes like this, it's important to balance your speed according to the situation you're in. So traveling down this road, even though it's a 50-mile-an-hour road, there are sections where you do not want to do 50 mile an hour. One thing you don't want to do as a definite thing is creep over that speed limit too, which is unfortunately what the pupil does here, hitting 54 mile an hour for a few moments. Because he corrects it quickly, I'm only going to record a driver fault on this occasion, but if it's maintained or that speed becomes more significantly above the limit, then that will become a serious fault. And if the examiner says something, that is definitely a serious fault. So just be mindful to keep an eye on your speed as you're coming down roads like that. It can be very easy to get carried away and creep over those limits. Coming up to the end of the road, we're taking a right turn, and it's a little bit further than the sign suggests. So you've got a road on the left, and then we've got the end of the road. Coming up to the give way sign there where the red car's turning in, you can see it's quite open, there's a good view, but it's a 50-mile-an-hour zone. So you'll need to make sure that not only you can get out into that road, but you can also build up your speed safely without causing anyone a problem. If you pull out and cause people to slow down, that is very likely to go down as a serious fault on your driving test. So make sure the road is clear before you pull out and safe before you pull out. Now up ahead there is a left turn. We've got a warning sign there for it, and just a little further ahead you'll see a direction sign pointing into it. Now the pupil was supposed to take that left turn, however he didn't see it in time, and as a result he just went straight past it, which is absolutely fine. Remember, missing a turn is not going to cost you your test. He did slow down quite a bit to try and make the turn, but is now recovering that speed, which is quite good. As we come up to the next junction, however, you need to be bringing that speed down appropriately for what you can see. Now this turn is quite sharp, quite narrow, and it's quite hard to see what's coming from the other side of it, so it's really important to bring that speed right down. Unfortunately, I had to tell the pupil to slow down, and even then he still hits the corner at 25 mile an hour, pushing him out into the wrong side of the road. That has to go down as a serious fault, unfortunately, and this shows how important it is to look for the early information about those turns coming up, to look at the Sat Nav if that's what you're following, and to look for road signs to tell you where that corner is. If you spot them early, you can bring the speed down nice and early, and as a result, you can make your way through nice and safely. As we enter the village here, you'll see we're in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. The junction on the left is where we would have came out had the pupil managed the right turn earlier. And then up ahead, you can see a blue sign telling us that we have priority over the oncoming cars. Even with that, what I'd like to see is mirror checks and a reduction in speed. Now, this is made all the more important by the parked cars and the white car a little further up, who is already waiting for something coming the other way. That should be a good clue to slow down and be prepared for that oncoming car. I'm going to record a driver fault for the yellow car there because I felt the pupil could have tucked in behind the Mini rather than squeezing through the gap. Again, we've got a meeting point here where this time we don't have priority, so you've got to make sure you're safe. Don't just follow the car in front blindly. Make sure you can see that it's actually clear before you go through that gap. Now, the white car giving way to the van there is because of the taxi pulled up on the left. However, this section of road is quite narrow anyway, so good mirror use and a lowered speed is really important when you're coming down this end of the village. We then go out into the countryside. We've got 40-mile-an-hour zone. A lot of the road ahead is not appropriate for 40 mile an hour, and you can see how narrow some sections are and how sharp some of the bends are. So the pupil does a really good job here coming down this section of road, slowing down for those bends so he can see what's around them before committing fully to them, and he keeps quite tidy in his own side of the road going around here too. Be very mindful on the left side there. The edge of the tarmac can sometimes be quite ragged. If your tyre catches the edge of that, if the inner wall of your tyre catches the edge of that, it can damage the tyre. So you want to keep your wheels fully on the tarmac, even if you're having to tuck in for oncoming vehicles. So just like here on the left, you can see those ragged edges. And using the left mirror frequently is going to help you feel more confident about how much room you've got for that. Turning right, notice the pupil slowing right down. He's looking up into the road before he makes the turn so he can see what's going on. We're also entering a 30 zone if you spotted that sign up on the left as we turned. And up ahead, we're coming to the end of the road where we'll turn left. As you come through any villages like this or towns, any built-up areas like this, it's really important to adapt your speed to what you can or can't see. So on blind turns or narrow sections, bring that speed down, take your time, and be prepared to stop to give way to anything coming the other way if you need to. Now up ahead, I've asked my pupil to pull up on the left, and I'm a little bit unsure why he didn't stop here. He put his signal on and then carried on round the bend and stopped a little bit further. That's not too bad in itself, although the signal could be a bit misleading. I am going to record a fault though, because as he stops, he pulls the front end away from the curb and it's sticking out towards the middle of the road. So it's not the most accurate stop. The best way to deal with that is keep your mind focused on where you want the front wheels to stop and look forward as you're stopping. Up ahead, you'll notice the blue car parked on the left, and that's going to push us out onto the wrong side of the road right before a bend. This should be taken with a little bit less momentum than my pupil does, and as you'll see coming around the bend, he has to react to the Mini coming the other way. Now this is why it's really important to slow down when your view is restricted by things like bends or parked cars, or your space is restricted by parked cars. So any situation like that, I'd like to see dealt with a little bit slower on the way in, because then the response to whatever's coming the other way can be a lot smoother and a lot more controlled. And that's why I've recorded a driver fault for planning and awareness on approach to that bend. Up ahead, we've got a couple of parked cars on the left, and I've asked my pupil to pull up just in front of the blue car. This is an angle start, and you will be asked to do it on any driving test. the examiners will tell you not to worry about any driveways like the one on the left there. All they want to see is that you pull up in a good position like this, you're checking your mirrors and signalling before you do, and that when you pull away, you're checking your blind spot, you're looking for oncoming traffic, and you're moving out safely. The pupil does quite a nice job of that. It's probably helped that the road's quite quiet. If there was anything coming the other way, I'd expect that the pupil would give way to it and not pull out until it had passed. Coming up to the end of the road, and we're going to turn left and then immediately right. So coming up to the end, you can see the view to the right is a little bit poor with the hedges in the way, so a nice low speed on the way up to it, and that allows plenty of time for the pupil to see what's coming before crossing the give-way line. This next junction has a much better view, but the same rule applies that you must not cross that give-way line unless it is safe to do so. So make sure that you're looking effectively in both directions, and just make sure that you're safe before you pull out into that new road and that you can build your speed up effectively. Now, the pupil's steering was a little bit awkward on the way into this bend, and it's caused him to go onto the white lines in the middle of the road. Whilst it didn't cause a problem and he corrected it fairly quickly, it's still got to be recorded because it does create a risk. So I'm going to record that as a driver fault on this occasion. Just be mindful as you're going around bends, it is really easy to position the car badly or cut corners. And often the cause of this is looking down at the curbs or worrying about the oncoming cars too much, causing you to overcompensate with steering. Always look up at where you want to go and be really confident about your positioning. Use the mirrors to help coordinate that position too and confirm what you're doing. But the most important thing is to keep your mind really focused on where you do want the car to go. When you're sat at traffic lights, just make sure you're keeping aware of your mirrors and anything coming up behind you. So when you do move away, you know if there's anything already trying to come around you or if there's cyclists nearby. And just be mindful that as you go through those lights, even though we have priority, other people may not be behaving the way they should. So we want to keep our eyes moving for anything that could affect our path. That can include cyclists, pedestrians, cars not paying attention to the lights or taking chances, or even blue light vehicles, because we should try to let them pass if we safely can, even if we're going through a green traffic light. The traffic lights up ahead, we're going to be turning right and then going straight ahead at the roundabout. Now, as we make that right turn, you'll see there's two lanes. Our normal position is going to be the left lane unless we know differently. So in this occasion, the left and the right hand lane go straight ahead, so we should be in the left hand lane. As they open out, you'll see the far left becomes left only, meaning we stay in that middle lane. Now, like I said, at traffic lights, you've got to be very aware of who's next to you, who's in those mirrors and coming up behind you. So when you move away, you can keep more safe, more alert. Notice how the pupil leans just a little bit too far to the left here. If there was someone on his left there, that could be a really serious problem. And this is why it's so important to watch those mirrors too, because if you know someone's there, it can remind you not to do that. And that'll be especially true if it's a large vehicle that needs a little bit more room. Up ahead, we've got two lanes leading into the traffic lights, and just after those lights, the two lanes merge in. You'll see the markings on the right telling cars on the right to move in. So it's really important to cover that right mirror. Look out for anyone who's trying to take the chance to overtake you. And if there is someone there, then at least if you spot them, you can respond to them by easing off and just letting them pass, or keeping your ground ahead of them if that's the safer option. If you're not looking in the mirror, you can't plan for them problems. Coming up to the next traffic light, we are turning left, and the pupil popped his signal on way too early in my opinion. Now, putting his signal on too soon is going to cause problems for other people because it's going to cause them to be confused about that signal and not really know why you've put it on. So just be very mindful that your signal accurately reflects what you intend to do. If you signal too soon, it's going to confuse people. If you signal too late, it's not going to give people enough time to understand what you're doing. So that signal has to be a nice middle ground where people have time to react, but not enough time to get confused by it. As we come back down towards the test centre, that brings this mock test to a close. Now, unfortunately, it does mean the pupil has not passed. As you've seen, there's been a number of serious faults. There's been quite a few driver faults. To pass your test, you are not allowed to get more than 15 driver faults, no serious faults, and no dangerous faults. Now, unfortunately, this pupil picked up 15 driver faults, 7 serious faults, no dangerous faults, but unfortunately, it's still not good enough to get a pass result on this occasion. If you found this video useful in preparing for your own driving test or have any thoughts or questions that you'd like, please don't be shy to put them in the comments. Please do like, share and subscribe too, and I will try and keep more of these videos coming. Thanks for watching and God bless you.